ABC Evening News with Bob Young, a complete report. Brought to you Monday through Friday in color by ABC News.
Good evening. 14,600 Naval and Air Reservists and National Guardsmen from coast to coast have been called up to active duty immediately. President Johnson is putting muscle in his demands that North Korea release the USS Pueblo and her 83 men. It's the first reserve call-up since the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 and the largest mobilization of men since the 1961 crisis in Berlin. Further emphasizing the gravity of this situation, the United States has called for an urgent meeting of the United Nations Security Council. For the latest developments in Washington, here's ABC's Frank Reynolds at the White House.
The two major White House moves today, the call-up of more than 14,000 reservists and the decision to request an urgent session of the UN Security Council, are in the classic tradition of President Johnson's approach to most problems. On the one hand, he demonstrates his determination to be tough if necessary, and on the other, his willingness to settle the dispute around a conference table if possible. Although it must be said there is no great confidence here that the UN will be able to solve the crisis. The Russians certainly have not been helpful in this matter, and they, of course, will be able to veto any Security Council resolution. Nevertheless, it was necessary to appeal to the UN, if only to show that no avenue of diplomacy has been ignored. The White House is choosing its words on the Korean situation very carefully. So it was significant that the President's news secretary this afternoon said, "The decision to request UN action reflects the President's earnest desire to settle this problem promptly and, if at all possible, by diplomatic means." Now, that sentence contains the clear implication that if diplomatic means do not prove successful, other action will be taken. This morning's order to activate certain reserve units was necessary, not only as a show of firmness, but to provide needed strength. For with the United States' big commitment in Vietnam, this country is not in an especially strong position in the Korean area. And unless diplomacy works well and soon, other reserve call-ups may be forthcoming. The President made only one public appearance today at a swearing-in ceremony for a government official. He appeared relaxed and even cheerful. But officials who have talked with him say he remains determined to see this thing through and is not prepared to accept anything less than the return of the Pueblo and her crew. This is Frank Reynolds at the White House.
And from Georgia to Washington State, from Niagara Falls to Dallas, Reserve and National Guard units across the nation are responding to the presidential call-up. At 28 military bases, the scene of mobilization continues into the night. A look at how the men of these units have responded. First, from ABC's Jim Burns at Floyd Bennett Field in Brooklyn.
Naval Reserve pilots of Crack Squadron 831 fly one of America's finest attack bombers, the Skyhawk. Today's call-up was no surprise to many of the unit's 150 men. Here's Lieutenant Henry Dodge, a veteran of 215 combat missions. What was your first reaction when you heard you were going back?
Well, I wasn't too surprised. Things were getting a little tense here the last couple of days, so I wasn't expecting it, but I wasn't shocked at all.
Well, what do you think your parents' reaction is going to be to this?
Well, I don't know. They just got over having me overseas 3 times. I don't know if we'll be going overseas again, but I'm sure they'll go right along with it, take it in stride.
The squadron is due to report here at Floyd Bennett Field at midnight tomorrow. And now across the continent for a report from ABC's Pierce Anderton near San Francisco.
At Alameda Naval Air Station, the first members of Squadron VA-873 to report were the executive officer, Commander Bill Shard, a salesman, and the commanding officer, Glenn Stinnett, a research scientist. Commander Stinnett said his wife was not excited about the call-out, and I asked him if he wasn't surprised by her lack of reaction.
Well, frankly, I'm not, because I've been married for 2 weeks when we first got notified that we were going to be sent to Korea. So this is not the first time it's happened to her. And I think my exec, Bill Sharp, put that very well a few moments ago when he said that the Navy wives are a different breed.
The A-4B Skyhawk is America's smallest jet attack plane, designed to fly from short carrier decks or small fields. The aircraft carries nuclear weapons, missiles, 2 cannon, and machine guns. Squadron 873's orders are to report by midnight tomorrow, and the regulars at Alameda are rushing preparations today for the reservists. Pierce Anderton, ABC News at the Alameda Naval Air Station.
And in a moment, a look at American military options in the world's newest hotspot.
This is ABC, where Thursday night looks like this. With fun for the young and the young at heart, Batman, starring that fearsome threesome, Batman, Robin, and their new crime-fighting cohort, Batgirl. Next, there's the Flying Nun, who uses her unusual talent by rescuing kittens and castaways. Then Bewitched, with its fascinating females who can always disappear. Well, almost always.
Mother, you have a pooped popper.
After that, it's time for That Girl, the story of a girl determined to captivate New York. And the big city doesn't mind a bit. And with the drama of Peyton Place, the gripping stories of the people in this small town take on new interest through continuing changes. That's how it is, Thursday night, all in color on ABC.
The Pentagon says that today's call-up is a precautionary measure to strengthen our forces. The 14,000-odd reservists is only a drop in the bucket compared to the pool of reservists that could be activated. But with the military beef-up, the agonizing search for a diplomatic solution to the crisis continues, as Frank Reynolds has noted. But if that diplomacy fails, what would our options be? What military action is being considered? ABC's Bill Downs reports.
If it's left up to the military to force release of the USS Pueblo and her crew, the options are few and highly dangerous. The Pueblo probably is in this dock area of Wonsan, a port said to be defended with 16-inch guns set in concrete, the bay protected by a system of MiG fighter bases said to have the heaviest concentration of Russian SAM anti-aircraft missiles outside of Hanoi. The balance of military power between North and South Korea is pretty even. The Communist Korean armed forces total some 370,000 men. The North Korean Air Force has about 500 Russian-built planes, including some of the latest MiG-21 jet fighters. The South Korean armed forces total 530,000 men. Its Air Force of American-built planes totals 200. But alongside the Republic's troops on the 17th parallel are 2 U.S. infantry divisions, all told some 55,000 Americans there. Well, since the Pueblo's capture, the Air Force reportedly has sent at least 2 squadrons of American fighter bombers to South Korea. And somewhere off North Korea in the Sea of Japan, the nuclear-powered carrier USS Enterprise is patrolling with a task force of escorts. Communist Korea already is within range of the Enterprise's planes. So, what are the options? One is a blockade of the port of Wonsan, seeding the bay with sonar, pressure, acoustic, and other new mines. But a blockade would also trap the USS Pueblo. An amphibious landing or raid to free the Pueblo's crew would take months to prepare and might not come off. There also has been talk of a reprisal air raid on a North Korean target, but the Vietnam experience argues against this. It would be a fairly simple operation to seize North Korean shipping that used the supply routes to Haiphong, but the communists are unimpressed by hostages. And finally, there is the so-called unthinkable option, America's nuclear weapons. Washington's Democratic Senator Henry Jackson said today that if ground fighting breaks out again on the Korean Peninsula, then the United States would be forced to use tactical nuclear weapons because American GIs cannot be mobilized quickly enough to save the situation. So, all the military options carry built-in perils, including the ultimate danger of World War III. This is Bill Downs in Washington.
North Korean radio has broadcast what it claims is the voice of the Pueblo's skipper, Lloyd Booker, confessing that his ship had been spying in North Korea's territorial waters. In San Diego, Commander Booker's wife, Rose, disputed the tape's authenticity. In Korea, 8 American soldiers have been wounded by a North Korean raiding party near the buffer zone. 2 South Korean soldiers were killed. Enemy casualties aren't known. In Seoul, South Korean troops said that they've killed 2 more guerrillas left over from Sunday's aborted assassination raid. Americans have been asked and have responded to crises before, but the Pueblo incident and today's military call-up come at a time when America is already engaged in one war, a war that has been challenged politically here at home almost as much as it has been challenged militarily on the battlefields in Vietnam. For an assessment of the mood of America and how she may respond to yet another crisis abroad, here's ABC's Howard K. Smith in Washington.
The long debate over Vietnam has obscured an underlying truth about the United States. It is that the Doves, though fast on the draw with demonstrations and letters to the editor, are a minority. Most Americans lean towards hawkdom. Except on the erratic fringe, they're not bellicose or provocative. But it is their decided bent towards a strong military force that enables Congress to be wishy-washy about poverty and civil rights each year, but never about defense. For a quarter of a century, Congress has devoted billions upon billions for military affairs, more than presidents have requested, because the people unequivocally want it. It's no use arguing whether that is wise or logical. It is simply a fact of life that Americans want the hardware, not to count it or admire it, but for warning, and if warning fails, then for use. The communists cannot defeat that force in combat. The proliferation of communist incidents lately, the raid on Seoul, the seizure of the Pueblo, the buildup in Laos, suggest that they have something else in mind. It may be that they think that in a sensitive election year, if they put enough pressure on enough places, Americans will want to retreat from Asia. If that is what they think, then all the signs are that it is a very bad miscalculation indeed. The kind of straw in the American wind that they should heed is the Gallup poll of the other day that showed that President Eisenhower was the most admired American in a year in which he proposed invading North Vietnam and possibly using nuclear weapons. President Johnson has resisted that mood in Vietnam, and he now shows the same restraint and caution in Korea. He is said to feel that war is too serious a matter for anger. However, it is equally true that if you never display anger, people will begin to think that you're incapable of it. If the calling up of the reserves now does not stop the communist incidents, the president is bound to come under severe pressure to take much stronger means to make clear to the communists the truth that they have apparently missed, namely that the American nerve they're stepping on is not the quitting nerve, it is the fighting one. This is Howard K. Smith in Washington.
And in a direct reaction to the military call-up, stock market trading today was heavy and erratic, with prices seesawing at each fresh news development. On the New York Stock Exchange, Dow Jones Industrials closed up more than 2 points. More than 12 million shares were traded. The value of the average share of common stock listed on the exchange index was up 9 cents. On the American Stock Exchange, an estimated 7,400,000 shares were traded. The value of the average share listed there went down 9 cents.
Here's a Purina Dog Chow vitamin, and here's a Purina Dog Chow mineral, and here's one for making tails grow and for a big bite. And here's some for all the rest of you. And it got all the things you need but love. I wonder why they keep leaving out the love.
And now, from Purina Dog Chow, a chance to share the adventure of the 20th Century Fox movie, Dr. Dolittle. Capture the color and excitement of this film spectacular right at home. It's all yours in the Dr. Dolittle Adventure Set, with the Doctor and 8 of his very best friends, along with background scenes right out of the movie. Just $1.50. Only from Purina. Get details on Purina Dog Chow packages.
In the war, Khe Sanh continues to be under siege as the enemy pours on artillery, rockets, mortars, American planes, and artillery counter by blasting enemy positions. For the moment, there's also a secondary battle, a battle to supply the defenders of Khe Sanh with ammunition, food, and water. Every American plane coming in for a landing, every helicopter hovering to drop supplies becomes a target. Today, just as a big U.S. transport plane had touched down on the Khe Sanh landing strip, a shell burst nearby. The pilot took off immediately and without unloading. There's heavy fighting, too, 100 miles south of Da Nang on the Bong Son coastal plain. There, the 1st Air Cavalry and South Korean troops are in contact with the Viet Cong and some North Vietnamese as well. Since Tuesday, 179 enemy have been killed. Others are trapped in a cave complex. U.S. losses so far, 4 Americans dead, 19 wounded. In Saigon, President Nguyen Van Thieu has delivered a hard-line State of the Union address. Thieu says the bombing of the North will be reduced only in proportion to the reduction in communist activity in the South. And President Thieu says the bombing will continue until the communists stop shooting completely. Equally as grim-faced as Thieu was Vice President Key, seated behind him here, who looked on during the speech but said nothing. In the week ended last Saturday, 218 Americans died in combat and 1,796 were wounded. The South Vietnamese death toll was 198. Allied sources estimate that 1,842 enemy troops were killed. Colonel Louis Shaw, who is the judge advocate of the U.S. Army in Europe, says most of the American soldiers who have deserted to go to Sweden are bums, as he put it. They are not the higher type of soldiers. There are at least 20 U.S. deserters now living in Sweden. Colonel Scholl saying that most of the AWOL soldiers were in trouble with their units, and he doubts that they deserted because of opposition to the war in Vietnam.
Great design, Tom. You really made it work. But what's that tree doing on the roof?
How did that happen? Instant transplant.
Come on, I'll give you a lift. Hey, that was a fast cigarette.
No taste left to him.
Yeah? Never happens with mine. Here, have one.
Viceroy, huh?
Yeah.
What makes them so different?
Beats me. Viceroy always tastes good. Taste never quits. Hey, we better get a move on before they lock up that parking lot.
Yeah, and I have to boost you over the fence. Hey, you know, this Viceroy does taste good.
Taste never quits.
Viceroy starts with great tobaccos, then adds natural flavor fresheners to make sure the good taste never quits. Viceroy, the good taste never quits.
This is ABC, where Friday night looks like this. Off to See the Wizard. Exciting feature films for family fun. Next up, Operation Entertainment, taking star-bright variety shows to military bases around the world. The Guns of Will Sonnet follows, starring Walter Brennan.
Remember what I learned you when you go up against a rifle, boy.
A young man inherits the legend of his father and all that goes with it. Then, Judd for the defense.
Not guilty.
Defending controversial clients with unconventional tactics.
When did you decide to take a look?
That's how it is. Friday night, all in color on ABC.
Clark Clifford has won unanimous endorsement as the new Defense Secretary from the Senate Armed Services Committee. Clifford told the senators that he does not favor a halt to the bombing of North Vietnam at this time. His nomination will go to the full Senate next week, and quick confirmation is expected. Welfare Secretary John Gardner has joined the growing list of high-level officials leaving their government jobs. Late today, Secretary Gardner explained why he's leaving President Johnson's cabinet. ABC's Bob Clark has that story.
The White House announcement surprised Washington, though there had been rumors Secretary Gardner was unhappy. His job had been one of the most important in the Great Society until the Vietnam War began forcing economy cutbacks in the health, education, and welfare programs he directed. Still, the Secretary insisted this isn't why he's leaving.
Some newspapers have speculated that the Vietnam War was a factor in my resignation. It was not a factor. The reasons for my departure are not to be found in any issue or incident, but are simply a judgment on where I can be most useful in the immediate future. Now, when I return to Carnegie Corporation, which I will do on March 1st, I will be directly involved in the problems of the cities. As you know, I think those problems are very grave indeed, but I believe that the American people can solve those problems if we face up to them, if we avoid the destructive path of hatred and violence, and if we bring to bear the full resources of talent and leadership that are available in every city of this country.
The fact the Secretary now feels he can do more for the problems of American cities as a private citizen still seems to reflect some personal disenchantment with the progress of the Great Society. This is Bob Clark in Washington.
Another cabinet official, Commerce Secretary Alexander Trowbridge, is reported in fair condition in Washington Hospital Center today. The 38-year-old Trowbridge is reported tired, run down, unable to shake a cold, and suffering from chest pains. He entered the hospital yesterday on his doctor's orders. The Federal Communications Commission, by unanimous vote today, denied Senator Eugene McCarthy free airtime on the television networks to answer President Johnson. In an interview carried by ABC, NBC, and CBS on December 19th, President Johnson made statements about McCarthy that McCarthy claims were political. The senator asked for equal time to reply, but the FCC rejected McCarthy's contention that Mr. Johnson qualifies now as a candidate for re-election and thus becomes a political opponent of McCarthy. The Pentagon has postponed until April the withdrawal of 35,000 American troops from Europe. Officials say the delay was ordered because of administrative reasons that include lack of barrack space in the United States and transportation problems, too. The Pentagon emphasized that the postponement is not a change in policy. Less than a week after President Johnson ordered a cutback in foreign travel by government employees, a House subcommittee arrived today in Tahiti. The four-member subcommittee is on its way to a highway conference in Australia. Subcommittee Chairman Frank Clark says the trip won't contribute to the balance of payments deficits. But a Treasury Department official contradicts Clark and says eventually that trip will contribute to the dollar drain.
Two people with head colds, 2 tubes blocked with cotton, 2 leading nasal sprays. This one has a decongestant. This one has a decongestant and penetrating medicated vapors.
Hey, the vapors got through the cotton.
Sinex vapors penetrate cotton, penetrate congestion. Only Sinex has Vicks soothing vapors and a powerful decongestant to unstuff your nose fast. Vicks Sinex nasal spray, the nose fixer.
There's nothing like spending an evening with a family. Playing games, laughing, spreading germs. That's right, spreading germs. Government-sponsored research recently concluded coughing spreads even more cold virus than sneezing. It's your move, Daddy. This message is brought to you by the Extra Strength Cough Mixture, Vicks Formula 44. As effective as codeine, but not narcotic.
This is a ship of fools.
And I know my way around, right? Right. So, when are we going to get together?
Now I'm being taken to prison to an island I know nothing about, and you're giving me a Sunday school sermon.
No! I'm sorry.
How dare you!
I could not resist. Oh!
I can't settle for things.
I don't know why I can't get you out of my system. You're not even really pretty.
Our biggest mission in life is to avoid being fools. And we wind up being the biggest fools of all.
Ship of Fools on ABC. Watch Ship of Fools Sunday at 9, 8 o'clock Central Time on ABC.
4 nuclear bomb parachutes have been found on the ice near where that B-52 bomber crashed south of Thule, Greenland. One of the parachutes was partly burned. Atomic experts say that this indicates that the bomb attached to the chute may have been blasted apart in the conventional explosion of the bomb fuse. These Mideast developments today: Israel okayed Egypt's plan to free those 15 ships trapped in the Suez Canal since the June War. 2 American freighters are included among them. In Tel Aviv, the Red Cross says that 2 of its officials were wounded in an exchange of gunfire across the Jordan River. 2 Israeli soldiers were reportedly killed. The shooting was at the Allenby Bridge. Spain today threatened to close all of its Mediterranean ports to the United States if the Sixth Fleet continues to call at Gibraltar. Spain has often complained about NATO ships using Spanish territorial waters, and the most recent complaint was given personally to the U.S. Embassy in Madrid. One source said that in a 12-month period, the Sixth Fleet has paid more than 300 visits to Western Mediterranean ports. Western Sicily has been shaken by another violent earth tremor. Today's was the latest in a 12-day series of quakes that have hit the area. 5 Sicilians were reported killed and 40 others injured in today's shock. All were rescue workers who were clearing away rubble from last week's quake that shattered the village of Ghibellina. Police in Miami are looking for the bombers who touched off explosions in 3 businesses early today. In each case, plastic explosives were slipped into the shops through mail slots. 2 of the businesses send commercial packages to Cuba, and anti-Castro activists are believed to have set off the explosions. In a surprising move, the state of Mississippi is prosecuting 11 white men in connection with the murder of a civil rights leader. ABC's Tom Jarrell reports.
It was here 2 years ago this month that Vernon Dahmer was killed. The Negro leader's home was firebombed by night riders after he had publicly urged Negroes to vote. Today at the Forest County Courthouse, local and state law officers completed a roundup of 11 white men indicted for the Dahmer crime. Most prominent was Sam Bowers, alleged to be leader of the White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. Bowers and 4 others were indicted for arson, the remaining suspects formally charged with murder and arson. Many of the same men were named earlier in relatively minor federal conspiracy charges. The surprise came when the state of Mississippi authorities took criminal action in the Dahmer case. Law officers said many of those arrested were indignant at being picked up by fellow Mississippians. At an arraignment today, the suspects pleaded not guilty. Travis Buckley, an attorney for most of the accused, was one of those indicted for arson. 90 miles away at Jackson, a close friend of Dahmer and brother of a martyred civil rights leader, today entered politics. Charles Evers says he'll seek the congressional position vacated by Governor John Bell Williams. I asked Evers about his chances in the predominantly white congressional district.
Actually, I think they're good. I think because, you see, there are many, I admit one thing, we've got to have some white votes. We've got to have a lot of white votes. And we've got to have all the Negro votes. But I believe that somehow or another that there are many whites in this district who want to do something, and they want to do something constructive and good a long time. This will be that chance to go in the polls and do something, and vote for a man that's going to do something for all the people.
5 white candidates have also announced. Tom Jarrell, ABC News, Jackson.
And strangely enough, Evers says he expects his strongest white voting support to come from areas where he has actively led civil rights demonstrations. In New Orleans today, Mrs. Beverly King appealed to the thief who snatched her pocketbook to give it back. The pocketbook contained $300, every cent she had, and that $300 was to have paid for the admission to the hospital for a critical operation on her 4-year-old son. The United Press International reports the New Orleans hospital, unwilling to make an exception in the King boy's case, refuses to admit him until the admission fee is paid in advance. The hospital denies that story. And that's the news. Bob Young reporting it. Good night.
ABC Evening News with Bob Young. A complete report brought to you each weeknight in color. This has been a presentation of ABC News. Anne-Marie is elated when she competes successfully against 3 girls for a job in a TV soap commercial. Then she learns why she is picked. See what she does to improve her image. Watch That Girl tonight in color on ABC.